Hey, thanks so much for coming. Do keep coming in and grab a sandwich and a seat. My name is V, and it's great to see you here at Big Questions this week. In a moment, we're going to be hearing a short talk. This week, we're looking at the topic of truth. So who decides what's true? And why does it matter anyway? So Will Zong is going to be speaking for us. Will studied law at Sydney, and he now works with the Christian Union. During the talk, please text in your questions to the number that you can see on the pillars and on the lectern here. We'd really love to hear what you think. We'd love to have a discussion. After the talk, there'll be a time for Q&A, so text in your questions during the talk. Great, so Will, over to you.
Thank you, V. That's right, topic today, fake news, do we need truth? And just to start, let me give you a few snapshots of some newspaper headlines. Here is North American paper. Trump warns of fire and fury. Unfortunate typo. In relation to North Korea, you can imagine it's a horrifying prospect, isn't it? Fire and fury from on high. Or this one, another North American paper. Man eats underwear to beat breathalyzer test, which I just love. Let me read you an excerpt. He ripped the crotch out of his shorts, stuffed the fabric in his mouth, and then spit it out. And as a former law student, this has resonance with me. A class of law students in court as observers were removed by the teacher when testimony enlivened the proceedings. People were leaving the courtroom with tears in their eyes, trying not to laugh. That's fair enough. Or final one here. You may have seen this on BuzzFeed before. I don't know whether to laugh or to cry. 2 years. I know. Yeah, let's go for an or. Anyway, our topic today. Fake news. I'll be honest, I don't know if those final two are true or not. But the topic of fake news, and of course the concept of fake news isn't a new phenomenon. It's been around for a long time. But the phrase has been doing the rounds, hasn't it? It's received a lot of attention in the press. Fake news as a phrase has been trending. It's hit Collins' Word of the Year, which I don't quite understand because I'm pretty sure it's 2 words. But anyway, Collins' Word of the Year. Clearly it's received a lot of attention. And our recent kind of interest in this topic, or kind of obsession with it, reveals, I think, a little bit of our attitude towards truth. You see, when we're confronted with a false claim, and obviously now we're not talking about typos or kind of mistakes or kind of things purely for comedic value, but when someone deliberately tries to mislead us with a false claim, we respond to that quite strongly, don't we? We don't like that. We don't kind of shrug our shoulders and think, oh, it doesn't matter too much. We really don't like it. And so when a company, for example, publishes misleading information, whether that's to kind of drive web traffic through their website, or whether that's to drive up some kind of commercial gain, we think that kind of practice is dubious, don't we? We think that's not right. Or take kind of political powers, state-controlled media. That makes us feel a bit uncomfortable, don't we? If that's the case, we kind of think, can we trust them to reliably transfer truthful information? Or will they use that opportunity to, twist the truth to further their own political ends? It makes us uncomfortable, doesn't it? Or even here in the West, great freedom within the press, and yet there's growing distrust of mainstream media. We kind of think, oh yes, there's loads of news outlets, and yet, is it the case that there's just a small elite behind the scenes pulling all the strings, manipulating information? Or the way that people can kind of palm off claims and allegations by using the label fake news. Donald Trump has obviously popularized the term fake news, and we kind of think, that makes us a bit uncomfortable, right? You can't just say, oh, fake news, don't worry about it. We react strongly towards that. We want to know what's going on, and I reckon this photo from the Grenfell protest kind of encapsulates that. We demand the truth. It's not something we kind of, it would be nice, but we're not too bothered. And we care about it. And in the backdrop of fake news, we care about truth. We want to know the truth. And of course, with the rise of kind of fact-checking services, Facebook with its guidelines for how to discern what's fake news and what's real, or BBC's reality check, all of these kind of things, we care about it. Indicators of something of our attitude towards truth. Even just take the incidents in Zimbabwe unfolding this week. As we read these various reports, we want to know what's going on. Is it a military coup? Is it not a military coup? Kind of pictures of this raid against the finance minister. Is that the case, or was that picture just taken from Brazil? We want to know what's true. And so at the outset, we ask the question, do we need truth? Well, it seems like our reaction is, of course we want truth. With the backdrop of fake news, we can see the need for it, can't we? And it's the same in other areas of life. So just take relationships, for example. Whether it's kind of general friendships or romantic relationships, they're based on trust, aren't they? And so what would you say if your best friend got married to someone and they later discovered it's all based on a lie about who they were, what they did, where they were from? We'd think that was devious, wouldn't we? Truth matters. Or we think more broadly, kind of on a societal level, it's great that our courts care about truth. Again, what would we think of a country where the courts cared more about the size of the brown envelope than what actually happened? We think that was awful. Or the way we think about human rights. How do we describe them? Fundamental human rights. Literally, inalienable human rights. You can't take them away from people. We're resting on this kind of objective core here, aren't we? About what it means to be a human being. Truth matters. It's not just up to opinion. It's not just up to your perspective. There are some things we care about. And so again, at the outset, we ask this question, do we need truth? We say, of course we need truth. But then it's not so straightforward, is it? Because as soon as we say that we need truth, immediately we ask, well, who's to say what's true? We say, of course we need truth, but who's to say what's true? And in our current cultural climate, it seems like big, kind of brash truth claims are such a barrier to tolerance and peace in our society. And in particular, of course, religious truth claims like that of Christianity, where Christians claim not only to know what's true for themselves, but what's true for everyone else. And when we're confronted with a claim like that, we think, how can we have this kind of dogma still in our current culture and current society? I think back to my time in London when I lived there, my school in particular. I reckon about half of our year group were from a non-white background. The whole range of ethnic backgrounds. And in that kind of society, how can we still have these bold, brash claims floating around? See, on the one hand, how can we be so sure anyway? All these kind of overly zealous claims to know what's true. Given the evidence, wouldn't it be more reasonable just to remain uncertain about some of these things? And then at the other end of the spectrum, isn't this precisely what leads to so many issues in our society? Fractures of various natures, divisions across different people, and of course at the extreme end, violent extremism. We're confronted with these truth claims and it makes us uneasy. On the one hand, we want truth, we see the need for truth, and yet at the same time it makes us really uncomfortable. We're wary of truth claims. And so we're kind of caught in the middle. What do we do? Well, our common approach seems to be to try to do everything we can to avoid truth claims. Try everything we can to kind of stay clear of them. As we try to embrace diversity, we can believe whatever we want to believe. We want to embrace that diversity as long as we don't impose that on other people. We want to avoid these big, brash truth claims. One way of saying everyone is right. But then the issue with that is that at best it's naive, isn't it? Trying to conflate these different understandings of reality. Just take our understanding of the identity of Jesus Christ. The Christian believer thinks this about Jesus Christ. The Jewish person believes this about Jesus Christ. The Muslim person, the secular person. At best, it would be naive to collapse them together. But more than that, it's not very dignifying, is it? And so if I had a couple of friends, for example, who were avid football supporters, really keen supporters of their football team, but they were supporters of opposing teams, a huge rivalry. What do you think they'd say to me if I said to them, guys, just get over it. You're basically supporting the same team. It's all for a common goal. What would they do? I mean, all my friends are bigger than me, so they can probably take me. They wouldn't be happy. It's not very dignifying to try to collapse these things together. But more than that, we want to recognize just how bold a statement that is. See, the illustration often given, how do we square these different claims to the truth? The illustration often given is that of a mountain. And so, here's the Christian believer. This is the way to know God. Well, how can we understand that to relate to the Muslim believer who said, no, this is the way to know God? Well, maybe we can understand them like different paths up a mountain. And so the Christian believer sets off on this journey. Look, through the woods over here, the jungle, up this ridge, up to the top of the mountain. But then over here, the Jewish believer, no, it's past this lake, through these woods, over that kind of, I'm running out of geographical features, this part of the mountain. Different paths up the same mountain. They all reach to the top. And at first sight, that's a lovely diplomatic kind of way of squaring these differences. Wouldn't that be a great way to understand it? All these different perspectives on the same truth. But do we see how bold that is? Because somewhere in the middle of that, we've managed to smuggle ourselves up into the luxury of a helicopter high above the mountain, watching everyone slog their way up the sides. We think to ourselves, well, if they knew what we could see, then they would understand it's all basically the same. It's a way of saying everyone is right. And yet it amounts to claiming this privileged position high above everyone else. And of course, this works its way out in society in all sorts of different ways. One big way is the privatization of faith here in the West. One way of saying everyone is right. Here's how Nick Clegg was speaking about Tim Farron, just in the build-up to the election. He said, it's the privacy of his faith which he should be able to hold, and hold dearly, in the private way that many people hold faith to themselves. What he does as a legislator, as a politician, that is a legitimate concern. You should judge them not by their private faith, but what their public actions are as legislators. Now, he's speaking defensive to him here, but do you see how he reasons it? Faith should be kept private, out of the public sphere. Faith has got nothing to do with when we decide what should be the case for everyone else. But if you keep faith to the private sphere, what's left then for the public sphere? What rules in that vacuum? And it seems like here in the West, at least, secularism then rules the day. Secularism is the only legitimate worldview then to rule others and to dictate how the public sphere operates. So very quickly then, this phrase that everyone is right becomes everyone else is wrong, at least when it comes to us, how we relate together as a society. And so we see how bold that is. Effectively, we're asserting or imposing, in fact, at least with regard to public sphere, we're imposing this assumption or this belief that there is no God on everyone else. And of course, that is a huge truth claim. We can't avoid them. Everyone makes truth claims. We cannot avoid them. And so therefore, trying to stay clear of them, it just won't work as a solution. And so we're back to square one. What do? We're caught in this little predicament. We see the need for truth. We clearly want truth. But we're wary of truth claims, and yet we can't seem to avoid them. What do? Well, to this point, I'd love to share with you what Jesus Christ says about himself. And it is utterly remarkable. It's a bold claim. It's a personal claim. And I like to suggest it's also a very unusual claim. The context for this is that his followers are asking him, show us the way to God. No, we don't know the way to God. Can you show us the way to God? A reasonable question to ask your religious teacher. Show us the way to God. And the way Jesus replies is utterly remarkable. This is how he replies. Jesus answered, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father, that is God, no one comes to the Father except through me. I am the way and the truth and the life. See, if avoiding truth claims doesn't work as a solution, maybe it's a case then of finding the truth. And that is what Jesus stakes a claim to here. It's a bold claim, isn't it? What you find here isn't Jesus kind of throwing another idea into the mix. Here's another way to look at life, another approach. Here's another kind of way to live. Maybe you want to try it out for a bit. And he claims exclusivity. I am the way, the truth, the life. And we're confronted with that, and we think, well, this just sounds like another fake news claim, doesn't it? You can imagine on the papers, man claims to be the only way to God. We wouldn't give it 2 seconds, would we? Local carpenter claims makes exclusive claim to the truth. We wouldn't even click on that kind of link, as attractive as that clickbait might be. You're not going to click on it. You think, that's rubbish. Is this just another one of those false claims with no evidence to support it? And of course, it seems like that when he died. When he's hanging on that Roman cross, as he's being executed in front of all his opponents keep heaping abuse on him. They say, hey, look, this guy, you remember this guy? He claimed to be the Son of God. He claimed ultimate authority. And he's dying on a cross for us all to see. As if he's this kind of wannabe revolutionary, crushed under the thumb like an ant, early in his kind of bid for power. And if that's the case, well, of course we cast it aside as this fake news claim. But what if he really did rise from the dead, as he predicted, as he claimed he would? What if he really did not stay dead in that tomb? See, if that was the case, this is no longer the simple fake news claim. This would be real news. And public at that. Something, a claim like this, you wouldn't be able to just contain it to the private sphere. Oh, that's kind of interesting, but only in that corner of the world. Nice for you, but not for me. This is a public claim. This would have an effect on everyone. Did he rise from the dead? In fact, this time last week at Big Question, that was the question. Resurrection. Hoax or history? Was this just a big con, or was this a matter of history? There's evidence there. Dig into it. But we see here just how bold the claim is. There's not one idea amongst many. He claims exclusivity, and that changes everything. It's a bold claim, but it's also a personal claim. See, he doesn't say here, guys, I've got the truth. I've discovered it. I know the way to God. Do this, and it'll be fine. What does he say? I am the truth. I am the way. I am the life. He claims to be the truth. When every other religious teacher points to the way or points to the truth, look, this is the way to God. Follow these steps, follow this path. And it makes sense of the mountain illustration, doesn't it? Follow this way, then you'll come to find life as it's meant to be lived. Here's the truth about God. Take this into your heart, and that's where you'll find life. And it's the same with secular writers as well. 5 steps, 10 steps. This kind of way of life, and you'll live like this. You'll be this kind of person. Here's the truth about reality. Kind of align yourself to this, and you'll live life the way it's meant to be lived. When in comes Jesus, and rather than pointing to the way or pointing to the truth, he claims to be the truth. And if that's the case, then Christianity is far more than just this way of life, or this kind of method or approach to understanding things, or a set of ideas to have in our minds. It all centers on Jesus Christ. And so if you want to suss out whether this is the real deal, we've got to engage with the evidence. Look at the evidence for the resurrection. Look at the evidence for the historicity of these gospel accounts. But also engage with Jesus Christ. What he's like. That's what we have here in these gospels. This is far more than just the kind of religious treatise or kind of a list of do's and don'ts. These are eyewitness accounts of Jesus' life. Their action centers on him. His interactions with other people, what he kind of says about himself, what he says about why he came. What do you make of him? He claims to be the way, not simply to know the way. He claims to be the truth, not simply know the truth. What do you make of him? It's an incredibly personal claim. And then finally, it's also a very unusual claim. We've said already, this claim is a big one. Probably one of the most ultimate claims you can claim about yourself. I am the way, the truth, the life. And we see that and we think, well, is this just a big con? Is this, again, fake news? Is this just a big power play? Well, if it is a power play, it is unlike anything we're used to seeing. Because he says this the night before he dies. And the odd thing is, if you read through these accounts, it doesn't take him by surprise. It doesn't seem at all unexpected to him. He speaks about it. He seems to predict it. And not only that, he seems to intend it. Now, this is where things get really wacky. He seems to intend it. He seems to plan it. He seems to describe it as his purpose. And if this was just this con, this kind of fake news claim to gain power, why would you do that? What is going on here? Why would you walk so squarely into a death that you could avoid? Well, as you read through the gospel accounts, you discover a slightly unusual claim. That this death was for the people who rejected him. Or to use the language we've used already, this death was for those who'd cast aside his claims as fake news. This death was for those who had cast aside his claims, who pushed them afar, tried to reason them out of existence, who tried to contain his claims into the private sphere. And of course, there'll be more explanation needed for kind of the how and the why of that, but I'd love you to see just how unusual this is. Because here we do not have someone who says, I know the truth about life, here is the truth about life, and I'm going to kill you if you don't fall in line. I'm going to kill you if you don't agree. And this is one of our biggest fears about big religious truth claims, isn't it? Isn't that what this leads to when you take these things too seriously? That's why these claims seem like bad news. But that's not what we have here. We have someone who says, I am the truth, and I'm going to willingly die for those who don't agree, so that they could live life the way it's meant to be lived. Again, there'll be more explanation needed as to the how and the why of that, but do you see just how unusual this claim is? And if that is what lies at the heart of this truth claim, we can just begin to see how this might not be bad news, but good news. And so the question for us as we're confronted with these claims is, what do you make of Jesus? What do you make of what he claims about himself? As I mentioned this time last week, the question was about the resurrection. Is it a hoax or is it history? That's on YouTube. Check it out. Engage with the evidence. What do you make of these claims? Is this fake news or is this real news? Come back next week. The title is Christmas Unwrapped. Why celebrate? Why did Jesus come? Come and find out more. And in the meantime, will you take away one of these? These are free for you to take. Eyewitness accounts of Jesus' life. That's where this claim is found in chapter 14. Why not see for yourself what you make of Jesus Christ? His interactions with people, what he says about himself, why he came. What will we make of this claim? What will we make of Jesus Christ? Let me stop there. We'll have a couple of minutes now, just around tables, chat about what you thought about what I said, what you thought about these claims, and in a moment we'll be taking questions, so do be texting them in to the number here. I'll be back in a sec.
Great, sorry to break in there. We're going to have some time for Q&A now. So we're going to have a mic going round. So if you'd like to ask a question from the floor, just stick up a hand. We've also had some questions texted in. But let's start from the floor. Anyone want to stick up a hand and ask a question? Great, I'll go for one texted in. We can always come back to the mic afterwards. Okay, so question here. My question is, how are you sure that the Christian claim is the right claim?
Good question. So is this just fake news or is this real? I guess the question then will be to look at the evidence then. So evidence for the resurrection, is that just a hoax? Is that just a convenient explanation? Or was that historical? And again, I'd commend to you last week's Big Questions talk. Find it on YouTube. If you're short of time, you can speed it up on YouTube. I've discovered that recently. 2 speed, 15 minutes, you're done. Engage with the evidence. As a CU here, we've got various resources as well, if you'd love to dig into some of the historical evidence surrounding that. Similarly to, I've lost my, John's Gospels there. Look into the evidence. Are they historically reliable? If they are, will you take seriously what they say about who Jesus is? But I think beyond that as well, kind of more personally, just thinking about the explanatory power of what Jesus says about the deepest desires that we all have. And so there's all these kind of evidences we can engage with, but also engaging with the person of Jesus and what he says about our life. So, our desires for love, or our desires for justice. What gives us the best explanatory power for that? What kind of worldview offers the best resources for that? Does that answer, that might not answer the question. I'd love to chat more afterwards.
Would anyone like to come back on that question? Stick up a hand? No? Okay, so another question. What does Jesus being the truth actually mean? So I guess that's more about the phrasing.
Good question, yeah. So what does it mean that he's the truth rather than he knows the truth? The claim basically gets raised up to a new level. So I could say to you now, I could say, okay, I've understood the crux of reality. I'm going to write my thesis here, read it. And that basically means I've assessed the information, I've understood it, here is the truth. If Jesus was to say that I am the truth, that he is the truth, I guess he's saying that basically reality is organized around him. Which again is a wacky claim, isn't it? That's a big claim. Not just that, okay, I've thought a long time, I'm really bright, I've understood the truth about reality. But no, the world is organized around me. That's the level of claim that he's making. And so again, it's a personal claim. What do you make of Jesus Christ? Is he just a crazy man who has far too high an ambition for himself? Or is he the center of all reality? And so I'd love to encourage you, read through one of the gospel accounts, see what you make of him. Does it stack up? And see for yourself.
Great, another question. So how can small, short-lived humans claim to know ultimate truth of something that falls vastly outside our understanding?
Excellent. We can't, is the short answer. And again, if Jesus is claiming this, if he was just a man, then this really is fake news. If anyone says to you, if I said to you, I can know everything comprehensively, hit me and wake me up, because that would be crazy. But if Jesus Christ is more than just a man, if he really is the Son of God, if he really is the center of reality, then that changes things, doesn't it? So it all rests on then the identity of Jesus Christ. You're exactly right, we can't. I wouldn't claim to do that. But Jesus Christ, if he is who he says he is, well, that would be the only thing that could give him the right to say something like that. Good question.
So here, if I think there's a chance Jesus is who he claimed, how should this change how I live? So if there is a chance that Jesus is who he claimed, how should this change how I live?
Ooh, if there's a chance. Take a marriage relationship as an example. If you're not sure that the other person is who they say they are, if they're not kind of fully committed to you, you're probably not going to be all that willing to go all in. You're going to think, oh, maybe not. But if you're certain, if you're sure, if you've got enough to go on, they think, okay, I'm going to go all in. And so when it comes to Jesus Christ and his claims and his offers, if we're not sure, well, then maybe the task then is to think, okay, I want to be sure. I want to learn more about him. I want to get to know what he's like. Then based on that, just think, okay, I can go in for this. I can maybe shape my life around him. I can see what he says about me. But if actually we're not sure, then maybe the task is to look into it. But maybe actually we're more sure than we think as well. This is the kind of weird trust thing that we have in relationships. My wife is just sitting over there, so I'm going to embarrass her. Can I prove to you that my wife loves me? Not in a mathematical way. Probably not very romantic either. But am I sure that she loves me? Yes. I trust her. Yes, I do. I trust that. There's evidence there. And there's a relational kind of nature there, where perhaps abstract proof wouldn't kind of mount up to that kind of scenario.
Great, thanks. Would anyone like to come back on those? Anyone want to ask a question from the floor? Cool. So this question, I'm not quite sure what it means. It might need some clarification, but it is quite short. Well, do we need truth then? I don't know if anyone wants to explain that more, or do you just want to kind of go for it anyway?
Do we need truth? No, be really happy to talk more afterwards, if that's your question. Do we need truth? I guess, given, again, our kind of multicultural society, all these competing claims to truth, can't we just get away with thinking, okay, we kind of have a reasonable grasp of the truth. Why do we need truth? Do we actually need it? We seem to kind of get by most kind of daily life tasks without really articulating it in this way. I guess my challenge would be, we are resting on something. And so, for example, just with physical laws, we are assuming that we've got a correct understanding of the truth about our physical reality, such that we're standing below the ceiling and that we wouldn't jump off a building. So in terms of physical realities like that, or again, relationally or societally, we are operating on the basis of some kind of truth. And even if we wouldn't articulate it, our actions assume that to be the case. And so then again, say for example on a societal level with human rights. Why is it that we describe human rights as fundamental human rights? If we say, oh, we don't really need truth, it's up to each person as to what they make of that, we're going to be pretty upset when it comes to matters about human life and whether or not they're inalienable. So I guess my response would be, these various areas of life, we operate as if we really do need truth. And if you're to take that truth away, I suggest there'd be carnage in society.
So this kind of links in. So are big, brash truth claims always in conflict with diversity in our society?
Excellent. No. And this is great that we're all here, willing to ask questions and to discuss. This is what we're about. And I guess this is one of the most beautiful things then about Jesus' claim to be the truth and then what he goes on to do, is that this cannot lead you to say, well, look, I've understood the truth. I'm therefore better than you. And if you disagree, I'm going to quash you until you conform. And he gives up his life for those who disagreed with him, who cast his claims aside as fake news. And if that is kind of then the basis of the Christian faith, if then as Christian believers you try to live in a pattern that was befitting of that, surely that would then give you the utmost respect for those who disagreed. Being willing to lay down your own preferences, your own comfort, your own life for the sake of others, seeking to serve them in that. And so I guess even though we have this kind of big truth claim to say, yeah, this is true, actually there's still scope for engagement and dialogue, and that is exactly what Big Questions, I guess, is all about.
Great, and probably last question, we've got a couple more minutes. So what were the main reasons why so many Jews, after the death and resurrection of Jesus, started to believe the truth claim of Jesus?
Oh. Could you say that again? That's interesting. The weirder my sounds, the more intrigued I am. Sorry. Please continue.
what were the main reasons why so many Jews, after the death and resurrection of Jesus, started to believe the truth claim of Jesus?
That is interesting because, I am intrigued, for a Jewish person, all the way through the Old Testament, you'll see there is only one God. And in a context where all these different nations are saying, no, there's multiple gods, there's all these different gods, they're saying, no, there is only one God. And so in walks Jesus, and he claims that he is God, and think, this can't fit, this can't be right. Partly that's why actually he got killed. They said, no, this can't be right, we've got to get rid of him. So why is it that, how could you explain that these people who thought this about there only being one God and about who Jesus was, how can it be that people who believe the same thing ended up then believing this? Well, this is partly what actually gives me confidence that the resurrection really was true. What else would totally transform this bunch of people, these 12 disciples, we know them now, to have come from this kind of worldview and yet their lives been turned upside down and to be willing to lose their lives for proclaiming something that the rest of their people had determined as heresy? I'm not sure, I've now forgotten the question, but that's what that made me think of, sorry.
Great, I think we'll wrap up there. Thanks so much, Will. Great, and there really is no hurry to leave if you don't have a lecture or anything. There'll be snacks coming out to you at the tables, so do carry on those discussions. Will also be around afterwards, and he'd really love to chat more. Maybe you had a question that you wanted to clarify a bit more, maybe it didn't get answered yet, so do stay around and chat to him. We'd also love to hear how you found the event. So on your tables, you'll see some feedback cards. So it'd be great to know how we can make it better. And if you'd like to chat more about this question or any other, just tick the I'm interested box and someone from the Christian Union will get in touch. As you leave, you'll see some books at the back that will help you think more about this and other topics. So there's a really small booklet here, The Arrogance of Christianity. Is Jesus the only way? So that looks a little bit more how is it possible to make this bold claim and still kind of this bold claim in society, this kind of bold brush claim. And then this book, The Reason for God, it starts off with a chapter titled, There Can't Be Just One True Religion. So have a look at this book as well. It fleshes it out a bit more. So it'd be great to read that and look more. So Bridgemas is coming, and so we've got some carol service coming up on Monday and Wednesday of week 8, so that's the 27th and 29th. So on your tables, you'll see flyers for that. We'd really love to see you there. I'm super excited. It's going to be at Great St Mary's from 10 till 11:15 p.m. Lots of carols, chance to sing along. There'll be some performances, there'll be an address, there'll be readings. It'd be great to see you there. Before that, we'll be back here for the last big questions. As Will said, we'll be looking at why Jesus came, why Christmas is a thing in the first place. Thanks so much again for coming.